Evolution is unlikely to have produced complex life forms. The probability of evolution of complex life forms is too low in order to actually explain the process of evolution. Now, it is true that when you look at probability, it starts looking very, very difficult for evolution to actually be true. And we talk about that when we do the abiogenesis lecture. But we will also talk about that natural selection is driving this. It's not random the way you think. The only thing random about it is the mutations that show up. But so many mutations happen that the chances are in your favor just because you have a lot of chances. If you try something enough times, you're going to have enough chances. In other words, maybe it is impossible to win the lotto, but not if I buy a billion tickets. Then I probably will win. And if life had enough currency to actually do that, then it's possible to make it happen. And we'll talk about that when we get to the abiogenesis lecture series. The evolution process is entirely random. Like I just said, this is a misconception because evolution is actually driven by laws such as natural selection, which explain why you have a tendency to do something. Another one, mutations can only destroy information, never create it. Wrong again. Mutations, by definition, more often than not, create nonsense or missense. But sometimes the missense changes the code and actually, in a way that actually enhances the structure. Think about it this way. If I create a mutation that I make a slightly longer finger and that makes me better able to grasp an object, that's a constructive or beneficial mutation. And so it's not necessarily only destructive. Another one is a myth. Darwin was the ultimate authority of evolution and the first person to come up with the theory. Also incorrect. In fact, the theory of evolution was around for many years before Darwin. The concept that animals change. And a lot of Greek philosophers, Chinese philosophers, Indian philosophers, Arab philosophers, and even other philosophers during the Middle Ages presented their own versions of the theory of evolution. And other scientists contributed to Darwin's formation of theories of evolution as well. Now, evolution as it is today did start with Darwin and Alfred Wallace, but there were plenty of evidence for previous theories of evolution. Now, I didn't even talk about them when I did the history of development of evolutionary thought because I was focusing on current evolutionary thought. But there were some other alternative wacky scientist theories that didn't really work out, like Lamarck's theories. I mentioned one of them. But there was also some crazy theories that the Greeks came up with to try to explain evolution. There were some people who actually tried to contradict what Aristotle said of fixed creationism. Evolution is not a new concept. It's a very, very old concept. And it's also not about Darwin only, because Darwin was just the first one. Much has changed since Darwin. Our understanding of genetics has revolutionized our understanding of evolution. And DNA, molecular genetics, and biotechnology in the 21st century has completely changed the way we understand the progression of life forms and the actual clocking of the evolutionary process. Another big one is the idea that the evolution violates the second law of thermodynamics. Now, what the second law of thermodynamics says is that things get more disorganized over time, basically. That the entropy of a system tends to increase over time. Now, what you're saying then is that if you're getting complex life forms out of less complex life forms, that's contradicting the idea that things get to be disorganized rather than organized over time. So it'd be more likely for things to underdevelop than to actually develop more, like it has with evolution. But you see, the reason why it's not contradicting the second law of thermodynamics is because every gain that has been done through evolution has costed something out of the environment. In other words, while the animals and organisms and plants and everything else that exists in life form has evolved and become more complex. And remember, evolution doesn't only makes complex things, it makes simplest things which pile on top of each other to form complex structures. But it's a basic conception that the second law is being contradicted, because in fact every step forward that evolution took was a step backwards for the environment. Energy was consumed for the environment in order for the evolution to take a step further for that animal. In other words, the only reason why animals can make strides forward as a population, never as a species, remember that, is because the environment is taking steps backwards. Energy is being consumed out of the universe to make that happen. And so it's not contradicting the second law of thermodynamics, because the entropy of the system is still increasing. The universe is getting disordered as life is getting ordered. That energy is being consumed for this to be actually taking place. Another big misconception is that certain structures are irreducibly complex. Now, this is a very tough concept to understand, but it's the idea, for example, that a flagellum can't be dissected more than it already is. It is as simplest as it can possibly be. Before you can take, if you take anything out of it, there is nothing that gives you a benefit. It cannot work without any of its parts missing, and therefore it could not provide an advantage to the organism without that. But it's almost impossible for all of those parts to evolve at the same time so that the animal could have the advantage that the flagellum provides. In other words, it's impossible for the flagellum to have evolved because it is impossible for all those things to have evolved together at the same time on the flagellum. And without it happening like that, you couldn't have a flagellum. Anything less than that wouldn't be useful. We already talked about this. First of all, steps towards it are useful. And if you study the flagellum, you will see that just having a projection outside your cell, even if it's not flapping, might give some sort of stability to the cell's motion, which gives you an advantage. So you do not need to develop the motor system of the flagellum at the same time that you develop the flagellum itself. So that already contradicts the irreducible complex system problem. Also, who says that the flagellum evolved altogether? Flagellum is an example of mosaic structures. The motor proteins of the flagellum are evolved for other purposes in the cell way before the flagellum evolved. The proteins which make the flagellum evolved way before the flagellum evolved. It's a part of the cell skeleton. So this is not an example of the cell developing several things at the same time. It's actually an example of a cell using things which are already around accidentally together at the same time. And then, wait, that made me have an advantage. And so it's a mosaic structure. And so right there you solve the problem. And in most cases, that's the solution for irreducibly complex systems. These systems were not built from scratch all at once. They were built in increment steps, which, even though not perfect, gave an advantage to the animal, and usually based on structures which were already around but were used for now different purposes as they were put together. Another thing that's a misconception about the evolution is that living things adapt to their environment throughout their lifetimes. Now remember that although you can learn and you can change your patterns of gene expression so that you make new kinds of proteins so that you can cope with, if you're eating too much sugar, you make more insulin, so forth. You are not going to change your DNA throughout your lifetime. So you adapt in the sense that I change my body and my behavior so that I can maintain my homeostasis. But you do not change your DNA throughout your lifetime. That has to happen across many generations through random mutations. So living organisms do not evolve. Only species evolve as a population across many generations. Another big misconception is that biologists believe in evolution. There is no such thing as that. Science is not based on belief. The theory of evolution provides a model that explains everything that happens in biology, and it's a model that's actually based on a lot of evidence that help us understand and make predictions about things. And so it's not a belief. It is a working explanation based on evidence. Okay? And a lot of evidence, that, as we discussed in this lecture series. Huge misconception, as you see in the picture here. Monkeys will eventually become humans, since we already came from monkeys in the first place. So they'll evolve into humans. Not exactly. There are many species of primates which were adapted to their specific environments, and the chimpanzee, for example, will not turn into a human over time any more than a cheetah could turn into a lion. They're just different branches of the tree of life. In fact, we did not come from monkeys at all. Monkeys and us came from the same thing. That's a very important distinction. Also, I said many times, evolution is not just a theory, because saying that it's just a theory implies that it's a guess, and it's not supported. On the contrary, there's plenty of evidence to support the theory of evolution. A lot of direct observations, including observations that see species actually evolving. Only an atheist can believe and accept the theory of evolution. Not true. A lot of scientists from a lot of religious backgrounds across all over the world actually accept the theory of evolution and find it to be compatible with their faith. Evolution, if disproven, must prove creationism. This is one of the biggest problems with creationist scientists. Now, I'm not saying that they're wrong, okay, because I like to keep an open mind, but I will say this much. You can't prove creationism by disproving evolution. If you disprove a theory, you didn't prove your theory. That's pseudoscience. You know, so that's not how it works. Also, no one has seen evolution ever happening. That is incorrect. Remember, we talked about this. We've seen bacteria evolve. We've seen viruses evolve. And we even see microevolution of larger animal species. And the fossil record gives you evidence of macroevolution as well. And to deny the fossil record, it's kind of ignorant. But if you're not willing to accept that, you're still seeing microevolution taking place. Order cannot come from disorder, so evolution must be false. There are plenty of instances in nature that show that molecules or substances can organize themselves randomly and chaotically, all right? But still, organize themselves. It does require energy, of course, but the sun provides that energy. And so, order can come from disorder. It is not, like I said, breaking the law of entropy because you're consuming energy to achieve this phenomenon. But for example, if you put a bunch of random molecules in a soup and spark a lot of lights in it, there's the Murray experiment that we're going to talk about when we do biogenesis, you can't create complex molecules. So order can come from disorder, and there's plenty of evidence from that in life. Another big misconception, there is evidence that dinosaurs live at the same time as humans. There's plenty of evidence to the contrary. All right? Scientists do not debate this. All right? There is no debate. The fossil record is clear. There is no evidence that humanoids ever exist, and definitely not humans, at the same time as dinosaurs. In fact, most of the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park did not coexist with each other. So that just shows you more piece of evidence that the people misunderstand the fossil record. Scientists regularly debate whether or not evolution occurs. That's another big misconception. There's a lot of debate about how evolution occurs, a lot of debate about how to make this theory better, but evolution is not debated among the scientific community. The scientific community pretty much accepts evolution. The only place that evolution is debated is among society, where people from religious backgrounds or other types of dogma still contradict the evolutionary theory, even though in face of just a lot of evidence to the contrary. Another one, creationism is a valid theory and should be presented with evolution. I don't teach creationism, first of all, because it is against the First Amendment, because if you teach creationism, you're teaching about a specific religion, because different religions have different creation stories, or lack of creation stories. So if I went to class and I taught Christian creationism, or even Islamic creationism, or Judaism creationism, or Hindu creationism, or all of these different kinds of things, it would be against the law. So I don't talk about creationism in class because it's not, first of all, a theory. A theory in science is something that's based on evidence. And it actually violates the scientific principle of causality. There is no evidence to support the creationism, because creationism is based on belief. And so it does not belong in the context of a scientific discussion. You can believe in it, you can't prove it. Another big misconception is that there are serious problems with the theory of evolution. Even though the theory of evolution is not perfect, there is very little that can be said incorrect about it compared to other theories that have been proposed. In fact, there's serious problems with the theory of gravity. You should know that what Newton said about gravity was completely wrong. Objects do not fall on a straight line towards the floor. In fact, they go down the curvature of the Earth as presented by general relativity. And you don't deny the whole thing that Newton said just because of that, either way. Same thing about evolution. Just because it's not perfect, it doesn't mean it's not our best working explanation. And finally, there's some people that say that Darwin recanted on his deathbed the theory of evolution. That he felt bad about what he did and he went back on everything he said. First of all, that's not true. And second of all, even if he had done that, that doesn't change anything. The theory works. And other scientists have talked about it and researched it and even expanded on the theory. So I hope you learn about these myths about evolution and contradict some of these things that people have been saying. All right? And go out there, learn about a lot, and don't do anything that would not make your mama proud.